Can a simple radio phrase change the course of a whole season? What he said and what Lewis Hamilton did not receive in Baku reveals everything. The Azerbaijan 2025 Grand Prix was not one more race. It arrived as the 17th appointment of the season, strategically placed at a time where the teams can no longer hide their cards, but they still have time to correct their course. For Ferrari, it was a redemption scenario. For Lewis Hamilton, a fire test in his still incipient stage dressed in red. The weekend began with promises. On Friday, Hamilton signed one of his strongest performances since he arrived in Maranello. He stopped the stopwatch in 1:41.293 during the second free training session, marking the fastest turn of the day. He did it with an authority that had not been seen for months, clean, precise, in total control of the car. And the most significant thing was that he barely beat his partner Charles Leclerc for 74 thousandths, a minimum difference that spoke not only of the level of the car, but of internal competitiveness in Ferrari. However, behind that brilliant time there was something more important. For the first time in the season, Hamilton declared to feel comfortable with the SF25 brake system. This confession, which might seem less for the casual spectator, is actually a peace statement between the pilot and one of the most critical areas of the car. In urban circuits such as Baku, where braking areas are aggressive and the minimum margins of error, trust in brakes is more than vital. It is a matter of survival and performance. What happened that Friday represented an emotional turning point. Hamilton, who had been dealing with a slower adaptation than expected to the Ferrari environment, seemed to have finally found that "sinned" feeling. The cameras showed him more relaxed, more communicative in the paddock, even joker with engineers. The atmosphere transmitted a feeling of hope, as if finally the joint work of months were paying tangible fruits. But all that collapsed the next day. On Saturday it dawned with subtle changes, almost imperceptible to the outer eye, but decisive for the performance of a Formula car. The asphalt temperature descended some degrees. The wind turned just some points on the weather clock. Environmental humidity increased marginally. These factors, together, altered the behavior of the SF25 radically. What the previous day had been an agile and balanced car, became an unstable machine, difficult to read, particularly in the rear. The engineers tried to compensate with last-minute adjustments in the configuration of the car, but it was not enough. The car did not respond, and Hamilton felt it in each curve. The back slid, the car did not settle, and what is worse, the answers from the wall were vague, unclear. In Formula 1, the margins are so narrow that even the small details as a pressure difference in the tires, an unexpected winding of wind in a critical curve, or a bad synchronized communication can be the difference between moving on to the next classification session or being eliminated prematurely. And that was exactly what happened. During Q2, at the most crucial moment, Hamilton struggled to keep control of the car. The frustration accumulated, time was exhausted, and the car did not deliver what was expected of it. It was then that, in a scene that is already part of this season's emotional file, the British pilot asked for radio help. But the real impact was not only what he said, but what he did not receive back. Formula 1 is a sport where precision is absolute, but trust is everything. And when that trust is broken, the consequences are not limited to a slow turn or a disappointing classification. They can literally define the success or failure of a whole season. In full Q2 of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton, with the accumulated frustration after several laps without improving times, did something unusual in his career. He asked for help. It was not a common complaint or a technical comment. It was an urgent, emotionally loaded call. The exact phrase was clear, direct, revealing. "I'm struggling with the rear end. Any advice? Please give me a hand." But what followed was even more shocking. A silence. 6.5 seconds of communicational vacuum. In a category where pilots and their engineers can exchange 3 ideas in half a second, where each response is usually immediate and millimetrically calculated, that period was not a delay. It was an emotional and operational disconnection. Hamilton did not ask for data. He did not request differential settings or a correction on the braking balance. He asked for support, and he did not receive it. For a pilot of his caliber, accustomed to having a symbiotic relationship with his engineer as it was with Peter Bonington for more than a decade in Mercedes, that type of disconnection is more than a discomfort. It is an alarm. Because when a pilot feels alone inside the car, even with hundreds of engineers monitoring every aspect of the car, morality collapses. Technical, the telemetry of the SF25 revealed a progressive loss of aerodynamic load in the rear of the car, particularly in medium and high-speed curves. Baku, with its combination of closed curves, long straight and intense braking areas, hardly punishes unbalanced cars. And the SF-25 at that time had become exactly that. Apparently due to minimal changes in track conditions, the behavior of the car collapsed. But the most worrying thing was that neither from the wall nor from the factory in Maranello managed to react on time. Riccardo Adami, the engineer assigned to Hamilton after his arrival in Ferrari, has experience, but no history with Lewis. That lack of history translates into a lack of shared intuition. With Bonington, a word was enough to activate an emotional, technical, human response. In Baku, silence felt an emotional fracture open to the public. A scene that, beyond cold analysis, touched a deep human fiber in sport. At that moment, something that goes beyond a mechanical problem was exposed. Ferrari's operational structure, known for its internal complexity and its dense hierarchical chain, does not have the communicational agility that Lewis needs. It is not just a matter of slow radios. It is an ecosystem that is not yet aligned with the form of work of the most successful pilot in the history of F1. A pilot who, accustomed to immediate responses, useful data and emotionally intelligent communication, is now in an environment that is still learning to work with him. In the background, what happened was not a strategy error or a bad configuration. It was a clash of operational cultures. And in modern Formula One, such frictions are lethal, because the speed is not only in the car. There must also be confidence, in reaction, in the intuition shared between the man who drives and the team that guides him. The 6-second silence was not just a pause, it was a crack. And like every crack in the F1, if it is not repaired fast, it can become a structural fracture impossible to reverse. In Formula One, the difference between a breakdown and a turning point lies in one word: management. What happened in Baku between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari is not a simple chapter more in a season loaded with drama. It is a moment that, if it is not handled with intelligence, could mark the beginning of the end of an alliance that excited millions from the moment it was announced. The disconnection shown on that radio, the silence after the request for help, is not just an isolated error. It is a symptom. A reflection of a structure that has not yet internalized how to work with a champion of 7 world titles. Because with Hamilton, it is not enough to have a competitive car. You have to understand how it communicates, how it reacts under pressure, and above all, how to build an environment where you feel supported in each decision that makes 300 kilometers per hour. Ferrari historically has been a team marked by his passion, for his pride, and also for his internal struggles. From Schumacher's era, the team has failed to consolidate a stable leadership structure that lasts. And this is where the great unknown arises. Are they really prepared to adapt to the mentality of a pilot like Hamilton? But if they are not, if Ferrari insists on its operational rigidity, if the wall continues to doubt or respond late, then we are facing a fracture that will deepen with each race. But the problem is not only 2025. This alliance between Hamilton and Ferrari was thought of historical key. It was visualized as the last great project of the British, an opportunity to close his career with a mythical deed, return a title to Maranello after more than a decade. But the titles are not achieved with dreams. They are achieved with execution, with synergy, with absolute confidence between the pilot and the team. And that trust in Baku received a direct blow. Now, everything depends on how Ferrari decides to answer. Because one thing is clear, Hamilton has sent a message. Not with words, but with his silence. With your tone. With the emotional urgency of that, "Please give me a hand." And that message is loaded with meaning. He is saying, I can't do it alone. Are they going to be with me or not? If the team's response is to reaffirm that alliance, strengthen communication, review technical roles, and open a dynamic that really listens to the pilot, then there is still time. But if the answer is to continue as if nothing had happened, minimize what happened, or hide it under simulation data, then perhaps we are no longer talking about the Ferrari de Hamilton, but of the Ferrari that let the last great opportunity of its recent history pass. Hamilton's radio in Baku is no longer just a career anecdote. The most disturbing thing is that, in purely sports terms, nothing was lost. The car had demonstrated potential. The speed was there, at least on Fridays. But in Formula One, speed without synchrony is like an orchestra without director. It may sound strong, but does not harmonize. And what was seen in Azerbaijan was precisely that. An unfortunate team at the most decisive moment. A pilot who, even with all his baggage, felt isolated. And an opportunity that, although minimal, could have taken advantage of with a time response, with an accompaniment signal, with a leadership that was not silent. Baku has left a brand. And what happens from now on will define whether that brand is transformed into a scar or a lesson. Ferrari still has the key. Hamilton still has talent. But time, That resource that in Formula One can never be recovered has already begun to run out.